Trapped. Framed for a crime you didn't commit. All the while, everyone you know thinks you did it, garnering you both fame and infamy. The only way to prove your innocence is to break all the rules. Can you do it? At any moment, the rules might change and the people you trusted might be against you. This is the reality 10th grader Lee Ping has to face. I want you to imagine something for me, okay? You're about 10 years old, it's the middle of summer, you've got no responsibilities. You hear cicadas making their noises, the air's a bit sticky, you've got a fan blasting in the background, and you're sitting way too close to the TV. It's about 6 p.m. and you're watching cartoons like usual. Suddenly, a commercial appears. It starts spewing information at you about a cartoon, where the main character gets embroiled in a series of mysteries, but also gets into a lot of wacky hijinks.
It's that time of the year again!
Welcome to the big times!
We're headed back to school in a brand new show on Pop Max.
I'm excited!
Anybody would be, especially when they get
Sentenced to 1 full year of detention!
framed for a prank he didn't commit.
Speaking the dad?
Who is doing this to me?
Will Lee and his friends find the truth or get caught by the Robo Principal?
Hey, Smith!
Find out in
You're hooked, and you don't even know what it is yet. Whatever the cartoon turns out to be, one thing is for sure, you're gonna watch it. Imagine for a lot of you, this scenario led you to the fantastic cartoon Gravity Falls. However, for me, this is a real memory, and it's not about Gravity Falls. Unfortunately, or fortunately, well, for me, I'm Canadian. So while I did get a lot of cartoons on Channel 51, on Channel 45 there were Canadian cartoons. Canadian cartoons are usually less pretty than American cartoons, but when you're a kid, you kind of just want to watch cartoons. You're not really looking into, which studio produced it or who are the voice actors or any of that. You see show, you watch show. That easy. When I saw this advertisement, it was for a show called Detentionaire, and honestly, the premise sounded pretty interesting. On his first day of 10th grade, high schooler Lee Ping is framed for the biggest prank of the year and is sentenced to a full year of detention. Thus, he's become the detentionaire, so to speak. Lee isn't going to take this sitting down though. He's going to try and find out who framed him and why, all the while being public enemy number 1. Everything I've said beforehand is true. Lee Ping does get framed for the biggest prank of the year and is sentenced to a full year of detention. That means all of his lunch breaks at school, he's stuck in the detention room, as well as once school finishes, he has to stay until 4:15. And I mean, that just sounds like pain, honestly. A previous review about mystery show Detective Conan, which, by the way, if you haven't watched, I highly recommend you do. I mentioned that the show's main strength for me is its characters and how they react to the mysteries rather than the mysteries themselves. Detentionaire is the idealized format of a mystery show. Its mystery is the centerpiece of the show, and all things surrounding that, like the characters, the settings, the villains, etc., are all things that are done to support the main plot in a way that gets you invested in the main cast and the mystery surrounding the series itself. The thing about the series itself is that, well, it's a Canadian show for sure. What I mean by that is, like Canada, it's very diverse and represents a lot of cultures, ethnicities, and people who just sort of, exist. There are a ton of people of color, there are disabled characters, there's genius characters. In fact, you've probably noticed that the main character, Lee Ping, is a Korean Canadian. His parents immigrated to Canada after he was born. It honestly did a really good job in emulating what a high school in Canada feels and looks like. One of its creators even stated that the school and its dynamics and all the cliques were based on personal experience. What I mean by for better or for worse it represents Canada is that the representation and diversity in the show is really good, and it feels really real. But also, Holger exists. Holger is one of the 2 friends in Lee's main friend group, the other friend being Cam. Holger is just... his whole character is this wacky European foreigner, and it gets old really quickly. Thankfully, you get used to this sort of thing as the story goes on, but it really reminds me of how Canada tries to appear to the rest of the countries in the world. Sort of like this diverse utopia, when in reality, Canada has been and still is quite racist. Holger isn't a terrible character or anything. In fact, I'd say he's a great friend to Lee and Cam. It's just his shtick as a wacky foreigner comic relief guy gets really draining in the early episodes. On the topic of characters, I feel like this is one of the show's biggest strengths. Li Ping goes to a high school, and it genuinely feels like a real high school I could have gone to. Like a lot of the shows about kids in high school, there are cliques. You know, groups of people who tend to hang out together, like the popular girls, the nerds, the jocks, the band kids, etc. But the thing about Detentionaire is, while cliques exist, they're not the end-all and be-all of all friendships and relationships, which I feel, as someone who went to high school, is more accurate than the cliques in American movies where people can't really interact outside of their own personal cliques. People in this show are mostly in their cliques, sure, but they also have other friends that they hang out with who aren't just like, you know, the single character trait that the clique is defined by. And I think that's just really cool. It makes every character, especially the side characters, feel immediately more like a real person and erases the idea of a character being beheld to a single trait that defines them. All of that is cool and stuff, but if you don't like the main character, then a show's basically impossible to watch. Who is Li Ping and why are we rooting for him? Li is the son of Alfred and Sue Ping. His mother is a teacher at the school and his father is some type of scientist. They don't really name what type of science he does, but even if they did, it doesn't really matter all that much. Li is a smart kid. He's a former math lead and is, like many high schoolers, trying to find his place in school as well as in society. He and his friends aren't really part of any group, but they're also not really outcasts. Just sort of like in their own small group. One of the things I really like about Lee is that he acts like a kid. What I mean by that is, in a lot of anime and manga centered around a main character who's in high school or is high school age, they usually act like adults. Li Ping is a kid in high school. He makes mistakes. Sometimes he prioritizes the wrong things, and sometimes he gets overwhelmed. He's a child. And I think what Lee can't do is as much of a character trait as the things that he can do. One thing that often defines a lot of detectives in media is their ability to solve cases on their own, or mostly on their own, with a little bit of outside help. Lee is absolutely not that. Lee needs help from others for the things he just can't do. One common theme throughout this show is that fighting just isn't an option. Like, pushing a bad guy over or temporarily stopping them is fine, but if a struggle ever happens, the main cast is probably gonna lose. Lee and his friends are all normal high school students against what is an army of full-grown adults. Even Biffy, the bulkiest member of Lee's crew, can't continue to fight forever. Lee is not Sherlock Holmes, he isn't Shinichi Kudo. Eventually, a couple characters who can fight and who are adults do join Lee's gang, and because of this, he's able to get further along in the mystery. The only things Lee has about him is that he's a pretty smart kid, and he's also pretty sociable. And it's only through the help of others that Lee is able to get as far as he does. Speaking of Lee's crew, let's talk about them for a second. While they do help Lee, a lot of the times they're also teenagers in high school with their own lives as well. And that constantly comes into conflict with helping Lee because obviously they have their own things that they want to do. Some examples being Lee's friend Cam's constant plots to become popular, or Lee's crush Tina trying to get a hot guy to like her. Also, one small note about Tina, I've watched a lot of anime where the main character falls in love with the prettiest girl in school who's like this huge school idol and everybody loves her or something. Can I say how refreshing it is that the girl that Lee likes is just like a normal girl who's sort of like a journalism nerd? She's not some misguided perfect ideal of a woman, she's just a normal girl. Anyways, what they want and what Lee needs in a specific situation might be at odds. Lee's main crew are his three main friends: Cam, short for Camilo Esmeralda Martinez, Holger Holgart, and Biffy. Cam is Lee's childhood friend and the one who's known Lee the longest, and honestly it really shows. Cam is often the person Lee confides in when he's discovered something along the course of the mystery, and just about his personal life. Whether it's girl problems or school problems, Cam is always there for Lee. Holger is the opposite end of the spectrum because he's only recently immigrated to Canada, but he's inserted himself into Lee's friend group. Despite not knowing them for very long, Holger has become an essential and ingrained part of Lee and Cam's lives. Holger is a very emotional and expressive person. He barely ever hides how he feels from Lee or Cam, and because of this, he's often the emotional center of their friendship, or the mediator when things get rocky. Biffy, well, Biffy's built different. Literally. Talking about Biffy gets into the other side of Detentionaire. So far, I've skirted around it, but no longer. Finally, you'll get what you've been missing this entire time. The mystery. Yes, I know. You can stop clapping in your room. It's finally time. The mystery of Detentionaire isn't just one mystery. Who Framed Lee leads into a conspiracy involving a lot of money, brainwash, lizard people, and magic pyramids hidden under the school. If you're wondering, does Lee ever figure out who framed him and why? The answer is yes, he does. But he also learns that the person who framed him is a pawn in a larger game that might involve everybody in the world. But you see, the problem here is, if you remember the premise of the show, Lee is stuck in detention. How does he learn all this crazy stuff while being stuck in detention? Well, as you probably noticed, the thing is, he doesn't really stay in detention for very long. Biffy is a student at Enigma High with Lee. He's got a large stature, which often causes him to get into trouble by accident. Maybe he accidentally bumps into a student and causes them to tumble while a teacher walks by. The teacher then thinks he's bullying that student, and because of his size, he's suddenly got detention. The unspoken premise is that this basically happens every day, so Biffy is always in detention with Lee. The teacher who watches the kids in detention is always asleep, so Lee and Biffy are basically free to do whatever they want. So Lee will often sneak out of detention to find clues about who framed him. Biffy is the person in the chair archetype for Lee. He's the hacking into the mainframe guy, basically. He helps Lee escape detention and then will usually have his location on GPS open and will let him know when he should start heading back to detention before the teacher who dismisses them comes in. He basically will do any of the technology stuff Lee and his other friends are unable to do, which is literally all of it. Besides being a tech person, Biffy is also just like a sweet dude who loves cats. Whenever he's doing his hacker stuff, we usually can also see a cat by his side that he's either playing with or knitting something for it. Biffy's just a sweet guy, honestly. Biffy asks Lee to not tell people what he's like in private because he, quote, has a reputation to uphold, end quote. Although his reputation is, I don't know, big tough guy that constantly just gets in trouble, he's allowed to live how he wants, I guess. Biffy is also childhood friends with the most popular and richest girl in school, Kimmie. This only comes up way later in the series, but Kimmie and Biffy grew up together and still respect each other, despite the fact that Biffy is a loner type and Kimmie is basically the mean girl's popular type. There's an episode later on where Kimmie gets detention, and so she's stuck in detention with Biffy and Lee. Lee has to leave to go do his detective things, so it's just Biffy and Kimmie alone in detention. At this point, the two of them haven't talked to each other since they were children, and they both led very different lives. Kimmie starts off with her mean girl shtick and starts criticizing everything Biffy is doing and the way he's dressed. As the episode progresses, however, they both start to wonder about why their friendship stopped in the first place. Biffy suggests it's probably because their personalities diverged, and that caused them both to drift apart. Kimmie says, well, why does it have to be like that? What is it about their two personalities that makes them incompatible as friends now? They begin to reminisce on their times playing together as kids, and decide that nothing's stopping them from continuing their friendship now, and from that point on, they both support each other and hang out together. It's honestly really sweet that they both learned that the only thing stopping them from being friends is the societal pressure stemming from their cliques, and once they've broken down that barrier, they're much happier. The interpersonal relationships in this show are really well done. The actual reconciliation of the friendship takes place over several days, so it's not like, one episode, two people have a problem, and by the next they're cool. Like in real life, issues with people take a lot of time and reflection to solve sometimes. One thing about Lee is that despite him not being very popular prior to the events of the show, after being framed for the biggest prank in Enigma High's history, he's become like a celebrity, which allows him to bypass all the cliques. If Lee needs to talk to somebody or needs a favor from somebody he doesn't know in school, chances are they'll help him because he's the Lee Ping. And if Lee needs something, it's probably gotta be for something cool or just out of pure respect for him. Back to Kimmie. Kimmie being the mean girl was most of her personality in the show up until this point, and after that we get to learn more about her and what she values as a person. This becomes especially important when Lee and Biffy find out that Kimmie's mom might be part of the conspiracy surrounding Lee in the school, and she has to confront her mother. Kimmie, prior to helping Lee and hanging out with Biffy, was 100% mean girl, rich villainous type. She would have become an obstacle for the main cast to overcome. I could have definitely imagined a world in which the final confrontation with the big bad guys, including Kimmie's mom, had also included Kimmie. But after she starts hanging out with Biffy, she stops being the mean girl type and just starts being a normal person, and eventually has to come to terms that her mother might be a bad person and the luxury that she lives in might be funded by the suffering of others, and eventually has to confront her mom. One thing Detentionaire does beautifully is that it fleshes out even the smallest characters to make them feel like a real person you could meet anywhere. Even the part where Cam's only shown interactions with his younger sister are either yelling at her or babysitting her make it feel like a more realistic relationship. One thing we learn through the mystery later on is that the cliques that are formed in the school are actually part of the plan for the bad guys. Eventually, they start brainwashing the students so they don't fall out of their cliques. But as we see with Kimmie and Biffy, who is in your clique and the dynamics within your group may not be making you happy, and in some cases could even be inhibiting you. The show does a really great job of making the subtext in the real world into text that's visible to the audience, i.e., cliques and groups like the nerds, the jocks, the popular girls are all just societal constructs, and the more we stray from hard, rigid lines in how we construct our groups, ideally, the more happier we'll be. At least, that's what I believe. In my high school, we did have cliques and things like that, but at no point were people unable to speak to each other due to some social hierarchy in my school. My student council president was also on the girls' hockey team and one of the most popular girls in school while also being a big nerd. Nothing prevented her from talking to who she wanted to or doing what she wanted just because of hierarchical expectations. The fact that students are suppressed into their cliques in Detentionaire as some sort of ploy is a really good way, I think, to express this artistically. One of the things about this show is that its personal relationships and characters are so grounded, but the mystery itself gets more and more esoteric as the story progresses. As you've noticed, I've mentioned some aspects of how weird things get later on, but I believe it's actually the fact that all the interpersonal stuff is so grounded that it elevates the mystery itself. If every episode Lee turned the camera and was like, "Oh brother, things just keep getting weirder and weirder," honestly, I think that cheapened the show. The fact that Lee is as surprised as the audience to find out some of these things is what I think lends the show its unique charm. I think that this also gets to one of the horrors of the show. As Lee progresses in the mystery, he eventually starts to learn things about everyone around him that, honestly, he might have been better off not knowing. As Lee chooses to progress into the unknowns of the mystery, he's putting the only thing he knows, his normal life, at risk. In anime and manga, no matter what cosmic horror or god-killing being they're going to battle, at the end of the day, the main cast goes back to whatever version of normal they had. But in the case of Lee, as he progresses, the cores of his life begin to take on different meanings until possibly, eventually, his pursuit of truth will destroy any sense of normalcy or stability he could have confided in. If you've noticed, I've avoided talking about the mystery of the show in too much detail. That's because, besides the characters, that's where the bread and butter of the show is. Figuring out who did what alongside Lee as he barely escaped from danger is one of the best parts of watching. Every episode of Detentionaire starts out like this.
At 4:15, detention gets out. Problem is, I'm a long way from school right now, and what's going on is, well, it's sort of a game changer.
With Lee in the middle of danger and about to be caught and lose everything. Then we flash back to earlier in the day to see how this all started. Who framed Lee? Who's the person emailing Lee and taunting him? What is that pyramid beneath the school? What do Lee's parents have to do with this? Who is the casino tycoon who looks exactly like Lee and seems to know everything about him and his family? Why did they choose Lee out of everybody else to be a scapegoat? At several points in the show, the mysteries lead to Lee learning information that could jeopardize his relationships or the relationships his friends have with other people. And deciding on whether or not he should act on this information, because it may or may not be true, is a very difficult decision, especially for a teenager. I think this reaches its apex when Lee starts having his suspicions against his own parents. I'd like you to imagine that you were in Lee's place for a second. You've uncovered a giant conspiracy involving hypnotized high school students, the biggest companies in the world, lizard people, a dude who should have died 100 years ago, armies of faceless hazmats that clean up situations, your teachers being clones of famous figures in history, a magic pyramid under your school, and some sort of prophecy that involves the tassel worms. Oh my god, I didn't even talk about the tassel worms, did I? Oh. Okay, so quickly, imagine a minion, okay? You know how like in the Minion movie, they're like actually immortal and have existed since the dawn of time? Okay, now imagine that, but like way cooler, is a big worm and helps Lee out when he's in a bind. That's a terrible description, but listen, this show is super dense for something that's only like 50 episodes, okay? So Lee finds out all of this stuff, and he also finds out that his parents might be directly involved in this. Lee's parents are genuinely very loving to him. Lee's mother is a bit hard on him because she wants to see him succeed, but it's clear that she legitimately is trying her best for him. Lee's dad is a lot lighter on him and is a much more kind parent. He even lets Lee get a tattoo when he was like 14. Lee's parents clearly love him and also love each other very much. There's no doubt in my mind that they both want what's best for Lee, but just because they're good parents to Lee doesn't mean that they're good people. This is something that Lee struggles with later on, and I think it's something that every person with a parent or guardian eventually has to come to terms with, seeing their parents as normal people as well as the people who raised them. If you were Lee, would you be able to confront them? Would you be able to walk up to whoever raised you and tell them that you suspect them of doing something absolutely terrible? Not over politics, but over how they're choosing to spend their lives. What if you were wrong? What if you were right? Who do you turn to for help after that? How can you know if you're gonna even be able to trust them anymore? These are all things that 10th grader Lee Ping has to struggle with. So there's something very crucial I haven't mentioned up until this point. Well, two things. One, all of Detentionaire is actually free and in HD, available to watch on YouTube. It's on the Retro Rerun channel, and I'll link it down below. Number two is, I didn't mention that Detentionaire ends on a cliffhanger, and I know, I'll stop you there. Detentionaire was set to release on streaming platforms, but it was terribly botched, which caused any hope of it making money from its online streaming basically moot at that point, which caused it to be cancelled right at that moment. Right at the point in which the biggest mystery up until that point was going to be found by Lee. That's terrible, frankly, and why would I tell a group of people to go watch a mystery show where the ultimate mystery is never solved? Well, because I truly believe that Detentionaire, as it is a wonderful show that should be watched. What Detentionaire is as a complete product is something I'll never regret, and I believe it's something I should share with other people. The final mystery never gets solved, sure, but honestly, the journey there was a fantastic ride. And sometimes, you know the saying, sometimes the journey is more important than the destination. I'll be honest with you. I'm a dude who's talking to a microphone on a Wednesday afternoon who really likes a dumb Canadian cartoon where a teenager gets a sentence of 25 to life for detention. Is this my favorite show ever? No, but it's always gonna have a place in my heart as a show I enjoyed watching as a kid and one I still enjoyed watching as an adult. Detentionaire isn't groundbreaking or revolutionary, but it is filled with tons of love, care, and hard work within every aspect of its production, and you can definitely feel it. If I've convinced even one person, not even to watch it, but just to appreciate the show as it was, then I feel like I've done my job. The Canadian kid inside me knows I couldn't let myself make video essays about the things I like without mentioning Detentionaire. It was a great show while it lasted, and it didn't even get to say goodbye the way I wanted to. But honestly, sometimes that's just life. Detentionaire is filled with so many events I didn't even mention, like Lee gets a girlfriend, Cam runs for and becomes student council president, Lee has a dance battle against a bunch of mathletes to hack into a phone. The Tassel Worm gets cloned. Lee breaks out of detention and ends up doing a concert in front of the whole school. Magic exists, and it doesn't work on only Lee. Lee finds out where the ingredients for the prank were made and links it to $1 billion company that his family is somehow connected to from generations ago. So many things happen in the course of this show during the mystery that if I told you how the mystery unfolded, I'd be doing a disservice to the show because it all unfolds so naturally and yet is so ridiculous that you can't stop watching. This show is fantastic and I legitimately love every second of it. Hey, if you've made it this far into the video, hit the subscribe button. You can always take it back, and it's free. While you're there, if you like my content, hit the like button and ring the bell to be notified next time I upload. Thanks.